you have positioned yourself to be in charge,
Mm.
but you are giving all of your power away. So not only are you in a profession that has limited control, even though it has this illusion of control, but you're actually giving a lot of your power away. You have to reclaim your power. You need to be an empowered person, an empowered teacher, an empowered woman, mother, wife, whatever. And I was like, and I never really heard that before. And that's when I started doing a ton of reading, podcast listening, introspective work. And I was like, if we could get this to our younger teachers sooner, more frequently, then I think we'd be much farther along the empowered teacher train, that line, than if we don't address it at all.
Sorry, God, been a sheep that likes to wander off. Toward some lines that I know I probably shouldn't cross. See your presence now, the more that I connect the dots. And your blessings every time you help me beat the odds. Had some doubts a bit, but now I ain't so sure of it. Acceptance of your sacrifice been clearing all these storms within. I was living life and thinking I could just ignore the sin. Not seeing I was ruining your graciously enormous gifts you gave to me. I basically just went ahead and squandered them and blame my earthly father any time that I had problems with money or just something in the world which had me falling in a hellish pit of shame that tried to take away my confidence. But luckily I prayed a prayer, you heard it, it was something like, God please come and save me, or if not then please just end my life. Didn't know it then, but that's when I was saved by Jesus Christ. Happy now to be a man that truly understands the I. All right, so welcome to 312 Ministries, a space for authentic interviews and conversations with believers, seekers, and non-believers, rooted in the spirit of Colossians 3:12, which, depending on the version you have, says, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience." With me today is Diane Manser. Am I pronouncing the last name right?
You are. It's perfect. Thanks,
Perfect.
Adam.
And we're here to discuss her new book called I Didn't Sign Up for This, which is One Classroom Teacher's Journey Through Emotional Fatigue to Personal Empowerment. Read the whole book. It's
Oh,
absolutely
thank you.
fantastic. Thank you so much for just blessing the pod today.
Thank you so much for having me. I was really looking forward to this. I had the pleasure of meeting Adam about a month ago, and we just started up this, casual conversation. I was like, "What do you do? And what's your life like?" And then he shared with me that he was doing this podcast, and what a really great experience for me to be able to say, "Oh, that's amazing the work that you're doing and how you're inspiring others. And would you be interested in having me on?" And then, of course, we got it together, and now here it is. I couldn't wait
Yeah.
from the moment that we decided to do this. So here we are. And it's
Yeah.
great to see you again, too. It's great to see you over the Zoom.
Yeah, great to see you as well. And yeah, I think just going back to like how we met, I know for me, when I heard about your book, I was like, this is something that's on my heart. And it's just something I feel passionate about talking about, issues in education. But I'm also like, I have no idea what's truly actually going on in
Hmm.
education. I've been so far removed. I have thoughts about how education could have been better for me when I was in school, but
Hmm.
like I felt like I've been so far removed, and I also think it's like I would want to talk to a teacher about the problems in education, and which I think like you really hit it home with just the how teaching should be considered an emotional profession. So
Hmm.
can't wait to talk more about this. I do want to
Thank you.
just open it up with reading a part of scripture in regards to your prayer request, which was just for kind of guidance with your book project,
Hmm.
which I think makes a lot of sense. I think I'm also praying for guidance for this podcast project,
Yes.
So I think it's when we're doing these creative things, I
Yeah.
think patience, I know for me, is when I really need to ask for because it's just like you can only plan so much and
Hmm.
only so much is in our will in
Yeah.
terms of getting stuff to happen. Like our chance encounter, I was like,
Mm.
definitely didn't feel like an accident, but if I wasn't in
Yes.
that room, this wouldn't happen. So I just feel like that's how God works in so many mysterious ways in our lives.
Yeah.
And so I think I was feeling very led to just open up this discussion with reading Proverbs 16, which this will be my first time reading it. So bear with me.
I can't wait. Thank you.
So, Proverbs 16. The reflections of the heart belong to mankind, but the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. All a person's ways seem right to him, but the Lord weighs motives. Commit your activities to the Lord, and your plans will be established. The Lord has prepared everything for his purpose, even the wicked for the day of disaster. Everyone with a proud heart is detestable to the Lord. Be assured he will not go unpunished. Iniquity is atoned for by loyalty and faithfulness, and one turns from evil by the fear of the Lord. When a person ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. Better a little with righteousness than great income with injustice. A person's heart plans his way, but the Lord determines his steps. God's verdict is on the lips of a king. His mouth should not give an unfair judgment. Honest balances and scales are the Lord's. All the weights in the bag are his concern. Wicked behavior is detestable to kings, since a throne is established through righteousness. Righteous lips are a king's delight, and he loves one who speaks honestly. A king's fury is a messenger of death, but a wise person appeases it. When a face lights up, there's life. His favor is like a cloud with spring rain. Get wisdom, how much better it is than gold, and get understanding, it is preferable to silver. The highway of the upright avoids evil. The one who guards his way protects his life. Pride comes before destruction, and an arrogant spirit before a fall. Better to be lowly of spirit with the humble than to divide plunder with the proud. The one who understands a matter finds success, and the one who trusts in the Lord will be happy. Anyone with a wise heart is called discerning, and pleasant speech increases learning. Insight is a fountain of life for its possessor, but the discipline of fools is folly. The heart of a wise person instructs his mouth, it adds learning to his speech. Pleasant words are a honeycomb, sweet to the taste, and health to the body. There is a way that seems right to a person, but its end is the way of death. A worker's appetite works for him because his hunger urges him on. A worthless person digs up evil, and his speech is like a scorching fire. A contrary person spreads conflict, and a gossip separates close friends. A violent person lures his neighbor, leading him on a path that is not good. The one who narrows his eyes is planning deceptions. The one who compresses his lips brings about evil. Gray hair is a glorious crown. It is found on the ways of righteousness. Patience is better than power, and controlling one's emotions than capturing a city. The lot is cast into the lap, but his every decision is from the Lord.
That's beautiful. Thank you for reading that. You
Yeah,
got a wonderful reading voice. I could listen to that all day.
thank you.
This
Thank you.
very meaningful, but soothing. And yeah, I think it's very meaningful. Thanks,
Mm.
Adam.
Yeah, for
Thank you for
sure.
sharing all that with us.
For sure. Yeah, that it just felt like what was really on my heart was commit your activities to the Lord and the plans will be established. Um, kind of other ways of saying that is like a man plans his plans in their heart and the Lord establishes their steps. And I think it's like what I found from your story, I think was just that. Is like
Mhm.
you had all these plans of how teaching was going to go, and it turned out to be something completely different. And I'm sure
Yeah,
something you never expected in terms of having a book like this.
right.
And I know it sounds like you always had it in your heart that you wanted to be a teacher. And so just kind of maybe give us insight about how childhood was, your
Mhm.
thoughts and feelings about what teaching was going to be like and kind of what it is.
Yeah, thank you so much for the great question. And that's the question that I have had the great opportunity to talk to a lot of people about. I was actually just with some aspiring teachers about 2 weeks ago. So we're in mid-October 2024 right now. About 2 weeks ago, I was with pre-service teachers at a university, and I had the chance to speak for about an hour about the emotional challenges of teaching and what we can do to bring ourselves to resiliency and hope and joy and confidence to maintain what we want it to be in our careers.
Mm,
And I asked that question of these students. I was like, what are you most excited about when it comes to teaching? And
mm,
all of these questions, all these answers were coming back. And it was exactly what I felt too. It's like, I am so excited to take take what I feel really enthusiastic about and passionate about and then give it to other people and do it in a way where it's high engagement. It's not transactional. It's not you coming into a classroom and taking down a bunch of notes and then here's your test and you leave. These students were saying all the right things about the enthusiasm they had for their content. Some of them want to be teachers and coaches. They have an enthusiasm for baseball, for field hockey, for swimming, whatever, and they want to like give that part of themselves back to young people too. A lot of the students were like, I can't wait to like build relationships to be a go-to for young
Mm,
people who might need it. And as I was sitting there listening to all these inspiring young people who are still in college, I was like, this is exactly what I would have said too.
mm,
Now, fortunately, I'm on the teacher path because I have figured out how to work through some of the hard situations that affected me. I'm on the teacher path where I still look forward to all those things, and I would still say, this is what I like about teaching. I haven't gone into a shadowy, murky path and stayed there. But my message to those teachers about 2 weeks ago was to share, you will get to have all of that. But there's a whole other layer to teaching that we need to be talking about as well, because those are where the challenges come in. And it's not necessarily the challenges of the hard work, developing lesson plans and assessments and grading and emailing. That can be a little like you can feel yourself going underwater sometimes. But the hard work isn't so much where the stress comes from. It's from the emotional challenges where we might have students that we're working really hard for, but they resist us. Or you might have students who we've set up a whole game or we set up a whole lesson, and then we have kids, little kids too can do this, who are like, I didn't like that. I don't like that. I don't want to do this instead. And, it can really affect you or almost hit some of your personal triggers of insecurity or self-doubt or feelings of not being good enough, coupled with feelings of wanting to be a people pleaser. And
hmm
those are some things we as teachers have to understand about ourselves and then try to work through. So, yeah, when I was younger, I had those same exact answers that those college students did. I would play school when I was a kid, loved playing school. I would get so excited about my student teaching, being able to like teach those lessons finally. And then when I went into the actual classroom full time as a teacher, I was like, wow, like some of that stuff's only like a small percentage of the day.
mm,
It's a whole other piece that I have to work through.
right. So how do you think, I guess, colleges, I would say it seems like dropped the ball in terms of preparing teachers for exactly this? Because
Hmm.
it seems like, yeah, like all these kids are just going out with just like, yeah, teaching's going to be great. And then like, I feel like there's this sometimes this exodus
Yeah.
of just like very new teachers of just like, this is too much. I couldn't prepare for this. So I do feel like also certain teachers, it's like there's such a calling. Some
Hmm.
people I think maybe go into it for the wrong reasons. I'll say I know my parents have always pushed for me to become a teacher, and I know like particularly after reading this, I was like, absolutely not.
Oh
Like
no.
I
Okay. I
like
hope not. I
I
was hoping for it to be an inspirational, yeah.
no, I mean I don't know. I'll say, I think maybe now, after what I've
Hmm.
gone through, I think maybe there's certain aspects of it where I
Hmm.
could teach, but I don't know if I could do it as a profession. I
Yeah.
think maybe like an adjunct thing
Right.
where,
Yeah.
and I think like also, I have many thoughts and feelings. I'm just like, I think like, yeah, bringing people that have had real life experience into
Hmm.
the classroom more, I think can always help. And just, I think there's somehow certain creative ways that in terms of talking about educating the next generation, it
Yeah.
shouldn't, I think, just be on the teacher's plate. I think
Yeah.
it truly takes a village, and I think to me, it's like that's what I think could also solve. I think some of these education um, issues. I think in just terms of dealing with the emotional toll of it all, it's like we can all step up. I think more as a community
Oh
and be
yeah.
of service in different ways. Like I think we all have something to offer. But in terms of managing a classroom, it's like there's so many different mix of personalities. I think that's also what I got from your book is just like
Yeah.
you just like why would this kid not be receptive to my kindness,
Yeah.
and I think I remember the one part of the book about the one student with the coffee, and that seemed like
Hmm.
what really just like day one, it was just like that was like your biggest struggle, and it was like I didn't expect this, but also I read it and also it seemed like such a blessing of you
Yes.
being able to overcome that
Yeah.
so early on, which it does seem like that's what almost led to the concept of this whole book was just how much you had to suffer through to find this place of joy and gratitude.
Yeah, thank you so much that you're saying in there. And going back to that college program idea, I think the tricky thing is there's so much that goes into getting someone ready to be that classroom teacher. And I don't
Yeah.
think that comparing it to, let's say, a surgeon or a doctor is a really fair comparison because those careers and those professions are so different. But the idea of like if you have a person and you have to take them to be able to go into the surgery center and perform a good surgery, where you have to take them and you have to get them into the classroom and be an effective teacher? Are you focusing on the how to and the mechanics, or
Mm.
are you focusing on these more abstract, esoteric, personal ideas of stress, emotion, overwhelm, burnout? I think the professors are going to say, we have to make sure you can do this job. So, are you able to take material and are you able to give it to a variety of learners? And are you going to be able to understand what you're teaching, why you're teaching it, and how you're teaching it, and then have it connect to standards and have it connect to important assessments and be able to give
Hmm.
feedback and be able to know that everyone's pooling with this learning so that tomorrow we retain it and then we come back the next day and build off of it. And I think that's where the focus tends to be. There's so much that goes into teaching students with differentiation, special circumstances, perhaps students who are learning English as other examples. There's so much that goes into like the how of the teaching and the what of the teaching that we're kind of not meaning to forget, but we're just not including equally as strong as a we have to build our own selves and our own emotional strength too. So when I went to that college a couple weeks ago, and I was sharing this message, so many of the students afterwards came up to me and they were like, I'm so glad that you said this because this is what I think we have to be talking about as well. And I'm like, yeah, we do. And I don't think it's a lapse of efforts. I think it's more of like a these other things are really important and we have to make sure you get them before we
Yeah.
send you out into that world. But because we're not talking about the emotional challenges as much as we probably should, and then giving the how do you work through those things, we are sending huge amounts of 23-year-olds or just newer teachers in general. You could be 35 and new to teaching, and then you could feel the emotional challenges despite being a little older than the beginner teacher. But we're sending out dozens, thousands of those teachers into the profession without that nurturing, without that emotional strength. And then in the first year, they're taking some hard hits. And that first year, they're going through a lot of overwhelm and self-doubt and insecurity. And then there's not really a big team to say, this is part of it. It is a small part of it, but it has a big impact. And this is what you can do. This is what I've done to work through those things. And then I do believe I'm with you with this mass exodus. We have teachers who are 1, 2, 3 years into it. For my book, I interviewed a bunch of teachers, and every one of
Mm.
them came down to the same concluding thought. Teachers
Mm.
who've left the profession have said, I didn't leave teaching because I didn't like teaching. I actually really like teaching. I didn't leave teaching because I didn't like the kids. I actually really like kids. But teaching hurt me. Teaching
Mm.
disappointed me. Teaching affected me in some negative way, and I just didn't know how to deal with that stress on the everyday, right? So I kind of started looking elsewhere. What else can I do with my degree? What else can I do with my life as opposed to experiencing this stress where I feel powerless? And as I was talking to these teachers, I was sharing, I was in the same situation and I also felt very powerless. And that's when I sought professional help. And the person I saw was like, you have positioned yourself to be in charge,
Mm.
but you are giving all of your power away. So not only are you in a profession that has limited control, even though it has this illusion of control, but you're actually giving a lot of your power away. You have to reclaim your power. You need to be an empowered person, an empowered teacher, an empowered woman, mother, wife, whatever. And I was like, and I never really heard that before. And that's when I started doing a ton of reading, podcast listening, introspective work. And I was like, if we could get this to our younger teachers sooner, more frequently, then I think we'd be much farther along the empowered teacher train, that line, than if we don't address it at all. So you're saying so much in there, and I appreciate it because even just the idea of like this community build too, like, parents have a role in this, teachers, admin, the students themselves have a role in it, and understanding that like what we are in is a relational profession, and we're in an emotional profession, and we're in a community profession. If we put the onus totally back on the teacher to be able to maintain and manage all aspects of that classroom, those teachers aren't going to last very long. And that's not what we want. We want the good people in the classrooms who are excited about teaching. We want them to stay, and we want them to also stay excited about teaching.
Sure. You described teaching also as a both and
Hmm.
profession. Can you describe a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, so for me, it is, and you already said it too, all on the same day, sometimes even in the same class period, you can experience this like, I am doing exactly what I'm meant to be doing. This makes me feel good. I'm making other people feel good. I am teaching these people something that they care about or they're retaining, they're better off because of it. This feels great. And then in the same day, sometimes even in the same class period, I teach high school students, so I have a secondary group. You could feel, oh, dismissed. You could feel like you're rejected. You could feel like what you're doing doesn't matter at all. It's completely devalued. And you could feel that all in the same day. So, a big part of the book has been what have I done to get myself to an empowered place? And while I still experience, even to this, to this day, despite having written the book, while I still experience issues that do affect me, the goal is to get back to the empowered place. So one thing that I've done is language things. So if I can say that teaching is an emotional profession, it helps me to go, oh yeah, that's right. It is an emotional profession. And that's why I'm feeling this way right now. Am I feeling inferior? Okay, that's an emotion. And where is that inferiority feeling coming from? Is that the full reality of my day? No, because teaching is both and. Because an hour ago, I felt great. I
Right.
felt rewarded and fulfilled and excited because teaching is both and. It's two things all rolled into one. And in a lot of ways, we're also two things all rolled into one. We're not just this typical person who has one aspect. We're multifarious. We've got many aspects to
Right.
our personalities that have brought us where we are. So being able to say that teaching is both and has been very helpful for me to be able to say, hey, in any given day, it's not a guarantee that your day is only going to make you feel really good. It's not
Yeah.
a guarantee because you worked really hard on your lesson plans and you decorated your classroom beautifully and you've put a lot of yourself into your profession and into your space. It's not a guarantee that it's only going to be great. You're going to have some challenges, and that's part of it. It's not the only part of it. But if we focus ourselves as that being the only part of it, that's when we can feel that like that drowning, that overwhelmed. And once we're in that space, it's sometimes hard to dig out of that if we don't have a clarity of mind to dig out of that.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned in the book, which I think this is why the book works so well, is you're speaking mainly to teachers, but the just life being emotional, I think
Mm-hmm.
in all professions, it's like these are emotions we all have experienced. It seems like
Yeah.
though the roller coaster of having such joy and then sorrow all in one day is not quite something everyone experiences on a day-to-day
Mm-hmm.
basis. So I hear that just like, yeah, you need to find that stillness in you to just be like, it's not about them. It's my response to them, right?
Yes.
It's how we
Yeah.
respond to the life. But there's one thing I highlighted here. It says you're holding this book in your hands because something in this title, the back cover, the table of the contents spoke to you. Maybe you also feel the pains from a job that should be so good to you since you are so good to it, but it hasn't been as good to you as you thought it would be, and it is time that it is.
Hmm.
And
Thank
I
you.
and I just love that so much. And I think like I was definitely having that struggle of like I'm working so hard and no one's noticing me.
Yeah.
And it's just like and I think to your point, it was just like you're seeking the approval of other people for your happiness. And so, um, describe just like more specifically also what you went through to just find that clarity in yourself, and all the hard work it took to just like find that stillness, that you bring into the classroom each day.
Thank you for highlighting that line and thank you for reading my book. I'm so
Yeah.
appreciative to you, Adam. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me. And I love that line too, because that I think does speak to a lot of our lives. If anyone listening is a parent, they have probably felt that way as a parent sometimes. Like here I am giving so much of myself to
Mm,
this, to this, part of my life, of my existence here. And in some ways, I just feel like I'm faltering, or like
Yeah.
this is not what I thought it was going to be. And then we can signal to those times where like, but it is. It also is. And that's why it's very confusing. But you brought up the coffee student earlier, and I want
Mm.
to share that. That was my very first day of teaching. And I went into it thinking like I was so prepared. I was so ready. Every detail that I could think of, I thought through and had at a 100% level, mostly because I was excited and I was also really nervous. So I thought, okay, if I can control all this stuff, it'll help me temper down my nerves. And at the time in my school, there was a rule about no food or drinks outside the cafeteria, a
Hmm.
pretty simple guideline. And, it can escalate a lot of fairly petty problems. But as a new teacher, you're trying to hold fast to all the school rules, set up a good reputation for yourself, not get pushed around. And the student came in with coffee, and I chose to escalate it. I chose to demand that he throw it away. It was a mistake that I made. And this is some of my clarity work that I had to go through. Number one, I had this teacher belief. I still have it, but I at least can identify it now. But I had this teacher belief that as the teacher, you get listened to. That was a belief that I
Right.
had, and I thought that meant respect. So I
Mm.
still have it because I grew up in a situation of like, hey, listen to your teachers. Don't talk back, right? Don't talk when the teacher's talking. I grew up with like a sense of my parents instilling that value in me, and then me thinking it was important too. So I had the assumption that other people are also going to have that respect and that value. Not
Mm.
everyone does, and like, respect comes in different forms in different ways. So when the student challenged me back, it did affect that teacher challenge. It was a huge trigger. And
Mm.
I then pushed back and escalated it, which was an immense mistake. So while that story happened my very first day, I didn't have a lot of those stories, but I had enough of them where I was like, why do I keep like pushing back against some of these
Mm.
students or like having to be listened to or having to
Mm.
be right or having them listen to me? Like, what is it? Because I'm otherwise a pretty non-confrontational person. I'm a very happy person. I like to enjoy people. So why do I get like, you're not doing this and I need you to? And then I started to learn about myself with this idea of like when that happens, it can feel like a disapproval. I don't like disapproval. It can
Mm.
feel like a rejection. I don't like feeling rejected. And then it can flare me up. So all this work that I've had to do has come from these instances in school where maybe I'll have a group of students or a class that talks over me and talks through me. Well, that can make me feel really devalued. Maybe I'll have a group of students or single students or a class that I just cannot get off their phones, which is a whole new thing that we've been dealing with in the last, 8 years, 10 years. But they'll be gaming all the time on their phones all the time, have an AirPod in.
Hmm.
And I will look at that as disrespect because I'm like, I'm trying to do this teaching thing for you, and I can't do my work if I don't have cooperative, engaged students. I can't get my work to land, and I'll see it as disrespect. So it was all these little hits that I was taking, some a little bit more intense than others, but they all kept going back to a place where I would feel powerless. Like, well, what am I
Mm.
going to do? And I feel like I'm being walked on and used. I feel like I'm getting taken advantage of. No one's seeing the value that I'm bringing. Why bother? It was all of that stuff. And the more I talked to other teachers, the more I learned we all feel this way. We all experience it. And in our profession, just the way that it's outlined, we can feel the pressures of that, the more challenging parts of that. And then we can also feel we don't have it at all. As an English teacher in a high school, I teach 5 periods a day. So it's like one class could be no problem at all. And the next class, I have to be like, "Ooh, okay, I gotta work a little harder to keep myself empowered here." Elementary, one school year could be fine. The next school year could have, out of a class of 25 students, maybe six who are really challenging, or you could have one that's really challenging. And now you're like, most of my class and my day's fine, but I have this one student who is really connection seeking, attention
Mm.
seeking. What am I going to do? So it's been through all of these examples that I have been like, what is it about me that's making me react these ways? How can I fix that, adjust it, and then will that adjust and fix the external environment? And
Mm.
that's what the whole book is about. So yeah, it's rooted in teaching, but to your point, it's really just about life. It's about emotional struggles we experience in life where we feel like we're off balance and how do we get ourselves back empowered?
All right, pardon the break here. I just wanted to give a shout out to one of my favorite spots around town. In fact, it's where I'm currently standing, and that is the Next Chapter bookstore in Sellersville, Pennsylvania. If you're a resident of Bucks or Montgomery County, or even if you're visiting from further away and love books, this is the perfect place for you to stop by. It's a woman-owned bookstore run by the wonderful Helen and Jess Ward, and I have an amazing testimony to share about this place, which I'll definitely dive into on a future episode. But for now, I just want everyone listening to know all that the Next Chapter bookstore has to offer. It's the ideal intimate space for author events or read-alouds, and with the holidays coming up, they've got gift cards available, and even better, they offer curated book boxes, which makes the perfect gift for the book lover in your life. They even have Diane's book still on the shelf. So come on in, inquire about those book boxes, show some love to your local bookstore, and let's all be ready for our next chapter. Now back to the show. Yes, you touched on kind of like how in the past you felt like maybe you respected like teachers more, like authority more. Yeah. And it seems like with the student disengagement, it's like it's not even that it's like they're disrespecting you. I think you said something in the book is like there's already kids that wouldn't listen, but now like technology is adding just like
Mhm.
something just even more to that. Like even the kid
Yeah.
like to the point where it's like the kid that might pay attention that day, they're distracted elsewhere. And that's not just a student problem, that's a
Yeah.
human problem.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts there in terms of and what's the conversations you're having to, I guess, combat kind of just that issue where it's just like, I'm guilty of it too. Is it like,
Me too.
I think it's more, exactly what this book offers is just more humility on these things.
Yeah, definitely. And more awareness. One
Mm,
thing that I learned, and again, all from the reading I've done, and I saw a therapist for a period of time, and the listening that I've done is when you want to try to move yourself to be empowered, whether it be in parenting or your profession as a spouse, partner, in your own personal life, you're trying to take on something that you want to do and you want to be empowered in this activity. We have to ask ourselves the hard question of what we're allowing that is disempowering us or making us feel like we cannot achieve what we want to achieve. What are we allowing into that space? And you can really take that idea of allowing and you can transfer it anywhere. But for me, I really had to take a hard look in the mirror and say, you know what, Diane? You're the classroom teacher. You're the one who's positioned to be in charge. And
right.
despite maybe societal problems or just this idea of like increase of technology or increase of apathy to school or increase of lack of motivation, whatever it might be, you're still the one who's in charge. What are you allowing to happen in your space? So
Mm,
at the time when I thought that, it's not that I was allowing phones and online games, computer games, because I wanted it. I allowed it because I thought, well, what am I going to do? Like at the time, there wasn't a school rule about it. At the time, I couldn't take the technology. At the time, so you make up kind of all these little excuses to why you're powerless. But I was like, no, like I need to be able to pull this back. Or if I have students who now, again, it's different if a student is sick or there's something going on, they put their head down or they're a little bit groggy or sleepy. But if it's like a consistent problem and a student's coming in using your classroom space to sleep, that has to get like, what's going on? What's happening in that student's life? We have to be able to ask certain questions to give assistance, support, advocacy to that student so they can be their most successful student selves as well. But again, it goes back to like, what am I allowing? If a student is
mm,
sleeping in my class, am I just allowing it? Or am I engaging in the conversations that signal to, I want to advocate for you, I want to support you, but I want to hold you to high expectations too. And therefore, I can't just let you sleep in here,
right.
And the same thing with phones. It was like constant conversations of, when you do this, it makes me feel this way, or I
Mm,
feel this way when you do this. Are you even aware of it? Are
Mm,
you even aware that's what's happening? And are you aware of how it's pulling the classroom community and the classroom purpose down? Because I
mm,
cannot be effective if I'm talking at a sea of people who are disengaged. It's just not going to work. And then if I come in every day and keep allowing it, I'm then going to get into this shadowy place of like, no one cares. Why bother? This doesn't really matter. And none of that's true. But sometimes those thoughts can be escalated and emphasized because we are feeling hurt. We are
mm,
feeling pain, disappointment from this thing that we were supposed to really like and from this thing that we were working really hard to make happen. So I think the first question we have to ask ourselves, which is not an easy question because it holds us to an accountability, despite it not really being our fault necessarily, is what are we allowing? And then
mm.
what can we do to, even if we improve it 10%, even if we improve it 15%, I think that's fair. I think that's excellent. Like, yeah, are we going to get to a 100% level in some of these things? Possibly not. But did we improve it to a 10 to 15% level? I'll take that win. Could better to be that way, moving in that direction than to stay stuck or to be moving
Right.
backwards.
Yeah, it reminds me of a Bible verse, actually, kind
Hmm.
of with that mentality, which I think kind of gives us that protection, which is simply, give me a second here. Uh, Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And I
Hmm.
think what you just said is just like, what are we allowing here? Are we allowing the world to dictate like what's
Yeah,
happening
yeah.
in our classroom? You
Hmm.
know, are we going or like are we going to actually like, hey, like no, like just because this is what's happening doesn't mean that this is going to contribute to the best flourishing for our kids and give them the right character.
Hmm.
I think you said something. There was a story in the book of a student you had. I think that was like she was doing all the work that was required of her, but her character was off.
Hmm.
And you were like you were like just getting your work done. That's just the basic requirement. Like there's
Hmm.
so much more. And I guess what I see as a symptom of kind of just like adapting to the world's ways is that issue is like is it seems like sometimes we're losing it with character building and emphasizing like a lot of workspace stuff of like the most important thing in life is to just like graduate school and get a
Hmm.
job. And it's like, no, there's so much more to it than that. There's like how we connect with each other. I think you talk about gratitude that when sometimes you're not feeling as grateful, you serve. You like to be of service in some way. And I
Yeah.
think it's like that does seem to be almost a lost art culturally. That I feel like the church does a great way of communicating that. And like that's usually like the community, a great community of people that are like walking more just in service and purpose, not so focused on like the measure of success is my grades and the job
Yeah.
I get in life. Important things, but it's not the most important. And I think when it comes to like, yeah, when a kid's just like sleeping every day, it's like something's going on. And
Hmm.
addressing that, that's probably that would be the biggest blessing in their life to figure out what's truly going on. But having
Yeah.
said that, there's something always going on with
Yeah.
everybody. So what's the more important emphasis? I think is almost like building the character so they can do the work.
Yeah. Oh,
Mm,
beautiful. Absolutely. And being willing to have those conversations. So earlier in my career, I think and I know a lot of teachers struggle with this because not only is it on social media, but I talked to a lot of teachers directly and heard this directly from people, and especially our younger teachers, which is where I was too. They're like, "Well, I don't want to be mean." Well, I don't want to come down heavy on a kid. Well,
mm,
I don't want to have to like assert and scold and tell them no or, be firm. It doesn't feel comfortable for me because a
right.
lot of times we're walking into a teaching profession because we are generous and we're loving and we're serviceable, and we're the kinds of people who often are the ones to step up to help people. And so to have to then assert or to be firm is not a comfortable place for our beings to be. It's not a comfortable place for our voices to be. So I've shared with teachers and I've shared with people who anyone who's willing to listen to me. I'm like, sometimes it's not a matter of who you want to be. Sometimes it's a matter of who you have to be.
Mm,
And sometimes we have to have those really hard conversations with students and with families or with administrators. And we have to be able to say, I am unable, or I am feeling powerless here. I'm feeling like I'm in a complete lose-lose because this is what's being presented to me. So something has to be done, whether it's a restorative conversation, whether it's, a meeting that we have, something has to be done to say, this behavior, I have it in the book too, this behavior is communication. I have to learn what it's communicating to me. What are you trying to communicate to me through your behavior so we can try to work together and cooperate to get through this in a successful way so that you feel good in here and then I also feel good in here.
mm,
And if that's not happening, then we are just going to either continue being combative or we're going to continue escalating situations or I'm going to keep sending you out of the room. And you're going to keep it's going to constantly be disruptions and stress. And I don't think anyone wants to go to sleep at night worried about the stress of the next day. And I don't think anyone wants to get ready for their work day knowing that stress is coming at them and they feel completely powerless. No one likes that. It feels
right.
awful. That's when people quit or get an attitude or they start to like fade into the background, like I'm out. That's when people start doing
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think there's a part in the book where you say to like a student, and he was like, don't mistake my niceness for weakness.
Hmm.
And I think it's like, yeah, we can, the tiptoeing or walking on eggshells around like a situation that needs to be addressed is not nice. It's not a kind thing
Yeah.
to do. The more helpful thing is the harder thing. And I
Yeah.
think like, in the Colossians 3:12, compassion is one of the words. And I was reflecting on compassion. I was like, compassion doesn't just always mean like you feel good. Like compassion is also like helping someone in need that doesn't necessarily want to be helped.
Hmm.
And that's the compassion, and it can feel like the hardest thing, but it's like that's the thing that's going to save that person's life. And that's what you're helping to contribute every day when you're, I think, walking in that compassion, true compassion, and I think true control of your classroom of just like, hey, and setting proper boundaries of like what's allowed. I imagine even if kids aren't receptive to it uh now, it's like in the future, I think they'll be like, oh wow, like, you know, Mrs. Manser was right.
Yeah. Or it's
Yeah,
also doing it in a kind way. It's like you can be clear and kind and direct. You can have all
sure.
those things hit the middle Venn diagram.
Right.
And yeah, that's something that was a line that I learned from someone who said they should not mistake your kindness for weakness. And I thought, oh, that's a treasure. That's a
Mm,
gift that you just gave me. And not that I had to say it a lot. I don't say it in a mean way, in a snarky way. I don't say it in a get back in your place kind of way. I'm not that sort of person, which has kind of landed in me early on in some problems because I'm not
mm,
that kind of person. But it'll be, if a student kind of pushes back to me and is like, well, you're supposed to be nice, or I thought you were nice, or how come, or they get affected but you're usually happy. Why are you not happy? And
mm,
I'll say I am usually that way. But when I have to assert and share that you're pushing me or that you're taking advantage here, I have to be able to express that to you because I can't just get walked on. I can't have you just do whatever you want here and have you mistake that this space is a space where you get to come in and treat it however you'd like to. No
mm,
one should be affected in that way. No one should just let anyone treat them however they want. So please don't mistake my kindness for any kind of weakness. It's just a
mm,
matter of I choose that, and when I have to assert in some other way, I do that as well. It's the going back to that both and idea. Yeah,
yeah.
all these things that I've learned, and then the more open we can be with others and say, this situation's really bothering me, or this one's really affecting me. I think the more advice we get, the more we get validation, the more we get like, oh yeah, that happened to me too, and I did this. Oh, the other day I was talking to a group of people, maybe like five of us, and someone had shared about how the student had taken advantage of like a kind of like a reward that they were given. So the next time the reward was given in the classroom, and I thought that was so smart. And I
Mm,
was like, oh, I'm totally going to use that. Thank you so much because
mm,
you didn't take the reward away, but you said to the student, you sent the message to the student, you did take advantage of this reward. And it was supposed to be in these parameters, and you went outside those parameters. So now we're moving it in the classroom, and that's where
mm,
you can have your reward. And
mm,
I'm sure the student's not going to like that. It's like you're not necessarily going to like it. The important thing is that we're learning through it. And you're
mm,
learning that in systems that have community and groups and society, that boundaries and parameters matter. And that's going to make you successful in your relationships and your work too. And best to experience that in the comforts of a school system than out in the wild world of real life.
right. Um, and I think to me, like just yeah, just sharing what you're going through. I think it's like sometimes it seems like there's a time and a place
Mhm.
for it. But I think what I'm experiencing walking through life is someone that's always like fine just being vulnerable. I think that's what I love about these podcast spaces. It's like
Yeah.
vulnerability, I think, can be so empowering, right? And I
Mhm.
think it's like when you're actually vulnerable in front of someone that's going through the same thing and they're like, but you're going through it too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes, I love that.
right?
Yeah.
And I think it's just
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, like we all are.
Yeah.
And you say something here, sharing the stories and validating each other in specific ways will be, in my estimation, what changes education and changes how teachers and teacher leaders view education. I think
Mhm.
that's so true also just across the board with all of our professions. And I do think, though, also, even at a deeper level, I think how we dialogue about God in our lives.
Hmm.
I don't
Hmm.
think seems for whatever reason doesn't seem to be allowed enough. But I would say like in just how we met and things like that, I think it's to me, it's like I think once we kind of you even mentioned a quote from Mother Teresa, like it's about kind of like our relationship with God. I
Hmm.
think ultimately when it comes down to so many of these issues and like the fear of like when you're able to be vulnerable and the release of that, like I think it's like and when I read the Bible, it's like humility is such a part of it.
Yeah.
And I think it's like when you're actually able to humble yourself and say, I don't know everything, and that's what I think the lesson from this book is just like I had all these expectations I didn't know,
Yes.
but I
Yeah.
worked through it. And it seems like
Yeah.
you were able to work through it. Um, I think with all these support systems, but do you also feel like in your spirit that like it was God guiding you through?
Yeah, I do. I really
Yeah.
do. And I very much believe that. And I think even in the writing of the book, as well, s- not even just the content or just the availability of ideas, but also in the support. Like I went through so many. I could only work on this book late at night because I teach all day and I would have work to do for teaching. And then I am a parent of two younger kids and they're in activities and we're running all over the place. They would kind of go to bed at 8:45 and I'd be like, okay, now I can work my project a little bit. And
Mm,
there were so many nights where I'd be very tired or I would be like, what am I even doing this for? And
mm,
I'm like, oh, this is like, am I really going to want to put this out there? It's so personal. I haven't even told people that I
mm,
went to see a therapist. Like, my friends and family don't even really know. And I'm going to put it in a book for people to read. Like, oh my goodness. Or, some of these situations, these stories in school, I worked really hard to keep quiet. I don't want people knowing that I had an issue in my classroom that I also contributed to, or that I was part of Escalate, or I mishandled, or hey, if I had picked up the phone and called home 3 weeks ago, I probably wouldn't be in this position, but I didn't do that, and now here I am. All those, I don't want to like openly admit to that when everyone
right.
else is seeming to have a great day. And I think, I'd have these hard moments, and then sure enough, the next day, I would have a conversation with someone, or they would be like, "Oh, I hear you're writing this book, and like, I really think this is what we need to be talking about, and I'm so glad that you're doing
Mm,
it because we believe in you, and you're going to be a great voice for this, and I could see you sharing this in big spaces." And it would just, I would kind of look up, and I would be like, thank you. I needed that, you know?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that didn't come from nowhere. That was,
Right.
in my opinion, it was strategically placed. It was placed in a time when I needed it, and it kept happening. Or
Right.
I would have a situation where I would be like, well, now that I've written the first draft, I need to find someone who can design the cover for me. How am I even going to do that? Like, where do I even start? And then I would just randomly share with someone what I was doing, and they would say, oh, I
Mm.
know a book designer. You want
Mm.
me to, I have a friend who has a friend who has a cousin who wrote a book. You want me to like see if I can reach out to that person? I'd be like, you're
Mm.
kidding me. And then boom, I have not only a book designer, but I'm talking like the most amazing professional book designer that I've worked with. I did like no hard work to even get to her.
Yeah.
Um, we're still connected, and it's just stuff that I would just kind of look up and I would be like, thank you. I really needed that. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for having my back here. And that also gave me this feeling that I was on the right track. I was doing something good. Where it goes, I'm not too sure, but I can with certainty say at this point in October, with this having been published in May, I know I've already helped some teachers. I know I've already
Mm.
helped some people, and that was the goal. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm on the right track. And then I get to meet you and you're like, oh,
Hmm.
I have this podcast. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like looking up like, thank you. I needed somebody who was going to believe in this and help me to share it. And
Yeah.
there we are. So yeah, very much I think there's this sort of pushing guidance. And for me, it was very gentle. It wasn't like I didn't go it wasn't like too hard, too fast, too much, right? And it also wasn't too much pain. If it were too painful, I probably would have stopped because I would have been like, oh, this is too hard to do. I'm coming into too many barriers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I,
It,
I feel that too, Adam. Yeah.
yeah. It's cool. I just wanted to background on like even how all this came about.
Mhm.
I remember I was presenting an idea for the bookstore where we met, Next Chapter Bookstore,
Mm-hmm.
in Sellersville. Definitely
Love
everybody
that
go
place.
check that out.
Absolutely. It is the best.
Uh,
You will walk into that bookstore and feel so at home, so welcomed. You won't want to leave.
no,
Like you're going to
it's
want to take
amen.
a book, nestle into a comfy chair, enjoy that space, and be like, can I just stay here all day? Because my energy feels great in here. That's the Next Chapter bookstore in Sellersville. You have to go.
Yes, absolutely. And we met there.
Hmm.
And I remember though, like I was talking to my girlfriend Jess and her mom about they're the owners there, so shout out.
Hmm.
They were I was talking to them about like an idea of like podcasting for the bookstore. And like, your book came up and I was like, oh, I would love to interview,
Oh,
whoever that is. Like
that's so neat.
and I kind of dropped the idea and I was just like, if it happens, it happens.
Mhm.
And I just remember like you asked me like what I do. And I said, I was like, I'm just starting this. Like I was doing it before. I don't know. Like I was kind of just like this wasn't really what it is now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you were just like, I'd love to come on. I was like, okay, yeah,
That's so cool.
let's,
That's
and I
great.
like
I
to the
love
point
it.
where I was like, I really wasn't like seeking it, and God gave it to me anyway. And
Yeah.
I and
Yep.
I find that often is the case where it's just like there's so many things. Surrender, I think, is just such a part of the
Hmm.
walk with God, where it's like there's so many things I think we try to cling on to control of. But
Yeah.
when it's truly like a desire, I think that's also God's desire, which I think is to
Mm-hmm.
have this conversation happen.
Mm-hmm.
He makes it happen. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like that's like in reading Proverb, it's just like, yeah, like we can make all the plans we want
Yeah.
and like, but he will establish our steps. Like I felt like I didn't do anything to make this happen other than
Mm-hmm.
just show up there. And
Right.
that's amazing.
Yeah,
And
and then also to have the opportunity to be able to share my book at that bookstore, that was
yeah.
such a meaningful event. And now you've read the book, and that means so much to me that you've read it and that I even got to be there. I feel the exact same way, and I do struggle with the idea of the surrender
Mm,
only in that when I really do care about something, I want it to go well. So I'm like, how do
sure.
you balance like working really hard at it and wanting it to be successful and putting a lot of like kind of pressure into it, I guess is probably the best way, while also simultaneously being accepting and willing to just have it go where it's going to go. Like I have really been working on that with this project because I
Mm,
have probably sent out, oh my, I don't even know if I want to tell you the number, a lot of hours in email.
mm,
Because that's the only way I can think to reach people aside from just picking up the phone and doing a cold call that probably goes into a voice machine of professors and professional development administrators for school districts to say, I have this book, I have this message. I know that it will serve. I know that it will give a purpose. And could we please have a conversation? I would love to talk to you about it. And out of all of that, it's like very, very, very minimal responses back.
sure.
And so part of me is like, how do you, maybe you have some advice for me and our listeners, like, how do you both work really hard at it because you care about it and you do want to see it go somewhere because it
Right.
matters to you, but also being like, it will be what it is, and I'm also okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, great question. I don't think I necessarily have a full answer to that, other than I think what I even just experienced was just like, I felt like it was an important thing to do. And I'll say there's certain moments with the creative process, like I'm also a hip hop artist, and like when it comes
Hmm.
to songwriting, this is such a part of it where you can keep forcing and forcing and trying to write these lyrics. And you're just like, this isn't it. I'll say like I think about Simon becoming Peter in the Bible,
Hmm.
and how Jesus says to him he's going to be a fisher of men. And all I can say to that is that all these emails you're sending, and all the experiences you had that led up to the book, it's like you didn't really plan on the book, but God gave you the experiences to write it.
Yeah.
And so I
Hmm.
kind of view life like that with God, in terms of, even if it's not the results I'm asking for I'm not getting, then it might not be the results God wants me to have. But it
Hmm.
doesn't mean to not send the emails. Doesn't mean
Hmm.
to just wait
Right.
and just hope. It means
Yeah.
let me keep showing up, doing what I feel I'm passionate about, where I feel like I'm in my purpose with, because I can either do it or not do it. The great way of knowing that it won't get done is if I don't do it.
Mm.
But I think, but then it's just like, then there's just, I think, I don't know. It's just, I don't fully
No, I
know.
love that. I love even just the idea of just keep showing up, knowing that you have a purpose with it. I love that. Because really,
Yeah.
what's the harm in that? It
Yeah.
helps to simplify it, and also it kind of does take some of that off your hands. But yeah, the idea of surrender, I love that. And also
Yeah.
knowing I had a girlfriend last year who, oh, she really helped me. And she was like, at one point, I was suffering her through my self-doubt. Like, you
Mm,
could tell she was like, oh,
mm,
Diane. And she said, listen, I think if it wasn't meant to be, and this wasn't going to serve something bigger than you, I think you would have had a lot more obstacles at this point.
mm,
And
mm,
she's like, and really, you've been working hard. She's like, I know you're working hard and you're tired. Because, like I said, I could only really work on it late at night. And then I would like work till 1 a.m. sometimes and be like, oh my gosh, my alarm's going off in 4 hours and 15 minutes to start my whole school day. Oh boy.
yeah.
And she's like, I know you're really tired. She's like, but this really hasn't been hard. This really
Mm,
has not been a struggle. And I was
mm,
like, yeah, I guess when you look at it that way, it has. I need to reassess that. And in all, a lot of things in my life, and I'm wondering if listeners too could feel that way, where it's like, hey, this thing has been hard, but it's been meaningful and worth it. And in a lot of ways, like it's been sort of laid out for you too. Not that you're not putting that hard work in, but there haven't been a lot of obstacles to make you say, maybe this is something I need to redirect or whatever. Yeah,
yeah,
I love that. Adam, that was just good advice. I love that. Thank you.
for sure. Yeah. Praise
I
God for
also love the
that.
way you say, wait, the way you say your wisdom.
Mm,
It sounds so good. I could just
mm,
listen to that all day. Like, just
yeah.
continue telling me your wisdom. It sounds great. You
I,
sound great, and
again,
it's
I'm,
it's just
yeah,
very meaningful right from the beginning.
for sure. Yeah. I give that all that praise to God, because it's like,
Yeah.
I, it's not by my own doing. Yes, I've had the experiences, but I see it as the experiences God gave me. And I'll just share, like, in November, I was at my rock bottom where I just
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to continue living life.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I kept trying to do the work versus just letting God do what was natural. Like I had all these desires for my music and
Yeah.
podcasting, and I think like also people pleasing in term or like seeking approval from men versus just
Hmm.
like trusting like my purpose. And I think like I walked away, I think very much. I see like the podcast I was doing before, like I was like that was a wall I was building myself, and now I feel like this is a wall that I'm building with God. And that's with just
Mm-hmm.
a lot of trust, humility. I think they talk about the one teacher in a book who just said like he just goes in with no expectations.
Oh yeah. Wow.
And I was like, that to me, that is the healthiest approach to life because it's like
Yes.
it's just like you never know what you're going to expect. And I was actually praying with someone this morning and just kind of saying any step you take, God can use. And so I think
Mm.
that also brings a lot of peace for me. And then also just like, oh, man, I totally lost my train of thought. um, but I think just going in, yeah, with no expectations, it's just like
Mm-hmm.
um anything can happen. Oh, and this is what I shared, and this is
Yeah.
something I
This
live
morning,
by.
right? Mm-hmm.
I live by is that like even a lesson is a blessing, you
Yeah.
know, and I think sometimes it can be the more powerful blessing if you really see it as such, and can let go of like, man, I was so attached to this outcome,
Yes.
um, and sometimes I think that almost can become your you can worship like an outcome, and that can be very destructive. You know, the Bible talks about like don't worship any gods before me, and I think it's like we can worship things and professions,
Yeah.
and I think that's why it's like if we put God first and say like, hey, like ultimately it's like I can only do so much, but you're in full control. It's just
Yeah.
like I think to me that just okay, I
Yeah.
can
I love
breathe.
that. You're
Yeah,
right. And that takes I love that wisdom because that is what happened to me. And like I mentioned a couple weeks ago when I was with those college students, I was telling them to hold on to this picture in their mind, to hold on to that enthusiasm because they will have that too. But there's also other things I have to consider. And for me, I did. I was holding very hard to the expectation I had as a teacher because I thought that's what it was supposed to be only. And if it wasn't that, I had done something wrong. There was something that I didn't do right, when really it's all just part of it. Like the challenges and some of the more difficult situations are part of the work too. In fact, they can almost be the most important part of the work. If it was just easy the whole time, like what kind of story would that be? If it was only something that was, laid out for us entirely, what kind of path would that really be? It's supposed to have some of these dips and turns because you're right, like everything is either a lesson or it's a blessing. And it's kind of our choice to see which one it goes into. So I love
yeah,
that. Sometimes we can hold really fast to our desires, our expectations, what we want out of something, and then we're actually idolizing that. We're worshiping that. We're holding it to a higher, I suppose, degree than just the journey that we're supposed to be experiencing in getting to that or achieving that, or we're missing that whole point too. So I love that. I actually wrote it down as you were talking. That's so
ah,
good.
awesome. Yeah, I love also just like how open and receptive you are. It seems like to wisdom. Like I think to me also that's like again, I think that should just be encouraged for everybody. And I think I had a conversation on my last episode, and he has this one song out called I think it's if this sense were common, and it's a commentary
Mm-hmm.
on like there not being much common sense in the world. And I
Mm-hmm.
asked him just kind of like within college education and as a whole, I said like, do you think there's more common sense being had or less? And he kind of said like he goes like the wisdom is there, but he goes like I think it's just there's so much like misinformation and disinformation, and just confusion, I think, on terms of just like what to put our beliefs in. And I think to me that does seem to be truly at the center of so many of these conversations of like how to improve things. I think it's like asking ourselves, so what are we believing in?
Hmm. What do we want to get out of this, and what do we hold to be the most important thing? And
Right,
then if your answer is, well, the most important thing is blank, then why are we allowing other details, stresses, conflicts, misunderstandings to impede if our most important purpose is blank?
right,
That other stuff's just in the way and it's clouding it. It's shadowing it. And are we kind of part of allowing that to thicken? And can we sort of like loosen that up? Like if
yeah,
I ask myself as a teacher, well, some of my most important purposes, as a teacher are to build confidence, are to make young students who I teach 14 and 15-year-olds to have them feel more confident about themselves, their critical thinking and their abilities and like just who they are as a person. If that's one of my purposes, well then I don't know, doing this thing over here, is that lending me to my purpose, or am I only doing that because I have been bothered by them, right? Or
Yeah.
I'm feeling affected by them, or I'm feeling stress. And so I think I love that. Like, what is really can we take a bigger look, a bigger picture look at this? Can we kind of pull back and say, what really is my purpose in this? And is the way that I'm acting and behaving, is that contributing to my purpose, or is it detracting me from my purpose?
Yeah. And I think that also being almost taught to students more. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like purpose and kind of just this deeper level consideration of this life we're all living, um, I think that can just have a profound impact. And so I feel like let's end it with a prayer right
Okay.
now. Just on this note, I think like my heart's going out to just like yeah, just wanting just wisdom, you know, for everyone that can find it. But uh, dear Heavenly Father, just thanks so much for bringing Diane and I together today. It's been such a fruitful conversation. Being able to share your wisdom and our experiences, and just seeing you in it, and just that despite all the storms we went through, that you were there to pull us out, and just give us solid grounding to be like, whoa, what did I learn? And so I'm very grateful that I went through all my storms, and I'm grateful for the storms Diane went through to write this book, and just have this be such a source of wisdom for teachers. And just to get this conversation started on, hey, what are we really doing here? I think it's such a amazing piece of work that I know is going to change a lot of hearts. And I think hopefully, yeah, start planting a lot of seeds in education where maybe we can start focusing on the things that matter most, which is not so much these professions and just schoolwork. These are all important things, and accomplishments are great. But ultimately, it's just like, what's the source behind the accomplishments? I think is the important thing to ask. And then I think it's just through that more good works can be created, like this book. And so just very grateful for this time today. And just my prayers are just for wisdom in education, more of our classrooms at work, and just continued peace that surpasses all understanding in these areas. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you,
Yeah,
Adam. That's
for
beautiful.
sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed talking with you today. I couldn't wait to talk to you, even though I met you just for a couple seconds at the bookstore. And I have to say, I was nervous too because it was a
Mm,
book event and I really wanted to do a good job. And I was
mm,
so grateful for the opportunity. And I was a little nervous too. And I hadn't experienced one of those before. So it was a first experience
wow.
for me. Just talking with you for those few moments, you were so comfortable.
Mm,
And I was like, I love this guy.
mm,
And I just really appreciated meeting you that day. And I truly couldn't wait to talk with you today. And this conversation was awesome. I feel like we could continue talking. I don't think there's a
yes.
shortage of ideas or topics. And I think that's a huge tribute to who you are as a
Mm,
listener and a podcast host, and how you make your guests feel. And I'm
mm,
sure all your listeners feel. So thank you so much for the opportunity and for all the good
yes.
questions and for understanding. Despite you not being a teacher, I feel like you just completely got it. And
Mm,
I'm so grateful to that. I don't know if everyone could. So
mm.
thank you so much for understanding my message and my experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And just yeah, God bless you, Diane, and your journey, and can't wait to reconnect soon.
Thanks, Adam.
All right. Bye, Diane.
Bye.
Starting small like a mustard seed. No need to question how I must succeed. Know that God will always cover me. Penny for my thoughts and to grow into a money tree. Starting small like a mustard seed. No need to question how I must succeed. Know that God will always cover me. Pay me for my thoughts, soon to grow into a